Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Nancy Drew. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, I think it's actually kind of interesting. Obviously, last episode and this episode kind of showcasing the fact is, I think as season 1 went on, the show got more and more supernatural, and it feels like they kind of pulled back a little bit. Obviously, it's still there, but it just seems like these past 2 episodes have had like the least amount of supernatural stuff. Obviously, it's still there. It's still a through line, but it's just kind of interesting to think about. But in this episode, we got a lot more of Bess's past. We obviously learned a bit in season 1, but we're kind of diving more into it, balancing like as her past is coming back to haunt her in the form of her husband, Steven. Obviously, she's trying to move forward as a Marvin and what that kind of entails and what that comes with. Obviously, Steven being not a nice guy, even for what we saw, like the way he was grabbing on her, threatening her and stuff like that a year ago, but then what she did to get away from him, because after she was thrown out on the streets, she met him and he taught her how to survive. It's actually interesting because it seems like he might be kind of part of the reason why she's the way well, it's a combination of being out on the street, needing to do whatever it takes to survive, and plus him teaching her how to steal, like kind of like take stuff off of people, like being a pickpocket. I think that all is where that part of her brain like that part of her where she's like, oh, when I get nervous, I like collect shiny stuff and stuff. Like it's a little second nature to her because she did it so long to survive. So I think there's that part of her thinking like, oh, if it's shiny, I got to take it because it's worth something and it's how I'm going to survive. I think that's been a byproduct of her trauma of growing up on the streets like that, and probably like Steven, forcing her hand to kind of be like, oh, like I'm kind of like the only person that you have. Your mom didn't even want you. She threw you out on the street, so all you have is me. So I think that's where it comes about. But obviously Ace is trying to warn her, but obviously she runs into Steven, and it's like he went to jail for like a while because of her, because she set him up so that she could get away from him, because she knew if she tried to just run on her own, she needed him out of the way long enough for her to kind of run away. But because he saw that picture of her with, the Marvins, that's what kind of sparked this, and how he was finally able to track her down. And he wants a particular piece of jewelry that the Marvins have, or he's going to, expose Bess. And Bess is having that whole conversation, like she's trying to work it out on what she should, say to our Aunt Diana. But Ace is like, no, just tell her everything's going to be good. But it's like, what if she doesn't accept me? It's like, have faith, have faith in the people around you, your friends. Interestingly enough, we only got it partly in the episode, but they got like a new cook or whatever Grant, which I'm assuming we're going to spend more time with. Interesting enough, it's the actor who played Jordan on the 100. Because I was just talking about it earlier. Like obviously the dude from I'm blanking on his character. He's also from the 100. He popped up in the final season. The dude Octavia gets close to, he's on Charmed right now. And also this character Val, who's kind of doing a piece on the Hudsons, that's the actress who plays Doc from Van Helsing, which also CW wise, she was on an episode of Supernatural. I want to say like a season or 2 ago she was on. Might have been I want to say it was like 13 or 14 she was in. I want to say 14, but I could be mistaken. But regardless, I just thought that was interesting. I was like, wow, all these familiar faces, but also like that 100 CW like thing. It's just crazy to me. Regardless, tangents and all that aside. But actually, when Bess actually talks to Diana, it's like, no, I already knew. I know about your past. It's like, right, like you think I wouldn't let someone in the family without doing my due diligence? So for Bess, it kind of made her less worried. She's like, oh, she felt the sigh of relief. But Diana's like, oh, you're part of the family now. Like, I know what kind of a good person you are. Your past is your past. As long as you're willing to put the Marvin family always first. I figured that was going to be. I was like, oh, that's going to be an issue. I didn't know it would necessarily come up this episode, but like that asterisk of always got to put the Marvin family first. But Steven, in his desperation, ended up kidnapping Nancy and George and forcing Bess's hand. So the thing is, rather than coming to Diana being like, oh, we should handle things this way, who knows? Like, who knows how Diana would handle it? Because it was Bess asking, she would have been like, all right, we can pretend like we're giving, and then we'll hand it over. But maybe it could have been like a fake out, or maybe Diana would have called the police, which that would have put Nancy and George in danger. But it's a situation of like, I think that speaks volumes but there's layers to that, because you can make the argument, hey, the fact that she's willing to go above and beyond stealing from the Marvins, because it shows she's not putting the Marvins first, that Nancy and George matter more, her friends matter more because they are her family too. Or the argument could just be like it's a bad habit of hers, still not being able to fully trust people and 100% let her guard down. So like under these circumstances, because even later on they're like, why didn't you come to us about Steven? You could have told us. She's like, I know, but when I saw him, just like she felt like a child again. Like, oh, like I, kind of stumbling. Like, oh, how I stand up to this guy that's kind of always had this power over me. I think that's another way you can look at it. Luckily, Nick and Ace were luckily able to get there in time before things got bad. It also shows you how messed up he is. Like, he set up like an old school trap like that, the burning rope for like the fire to fall and for the entire place. And you were willing to kill 2 people that you didn't know. I mean, even Bess was like, oh, I know he's serious, because she's like, I saw him nearly beat someone to death. It's like, I mean, when you're so cutthroat like that, I guess it doesn't matter. But it's like, damn, like, I get you're trying to force Bess's hand, but it's like, oh, I'm trying to handle things diplomatically, but you force my hand, got to do things this way. I was like, that's effed up that you're willing to just kill 2 random people just to prove a point to Bess. It's like, shows how much of a psychopath he is. I mean, once again, it's not like he's a good guy. It's a good thing Bess was getting away from, because it seemed like he was very controlling and abusive. Like I said, just the way he grabbed her on the arm was like, like, oh, you idiot. Now, like, my bath's going to smell like, rancid, like that rancid drink or whatever. Like, the way he was talking down to her and stuff like that, it kind of showed you like he had them, like, that's why she went out of her way to devise the whole getting him arrested just so she can get away from him. She was hiding from him the entire time, so, and that was just kind of a development. And sadly, the storyline ended up playing out the way it did, where I thought it was crazy. Like, he set the whole thing in motion, because I was like, I thought he was going to get away with the jewel, but it's like, no, there's a microbot in it, and it's like telling us that it's here. And she's like, wait, what? And obviously Bess is still kind of lying, but she's like, no, not only did you steal from me, don't stand here and lie to me, Bess. She's like, I'm sorry all this is happening. It's like, for her, it's like, for Diana, it's like, your past is always going to come back. Your past isn't as behind you as we thought it was. And it's like, once again, Bess could have probably gone to her and like, hey, like, they could have devised something, but it might have been a thing of, Diana was like, could have been a thing of, oh, we don't give into extortion. So no matter what, yes, we'll call the police, but that would have threatened Nancy and George's life. Plus, there wasn't a lot of time, but once again, we don't know how Diana would have responded because Bess didn't give her a chance. But once again, the whole element of put the Marvin family first, I feel like that would have been a situation where it's like, yeah, Diana wouldn't have been too cool with that, but we don't know. She did take an interest in Bess, knowing Bess's past, but it's also like, oh, I guess your past isn't so far behind you because you felt the need to steal from me and just, to do all this, to go about it this way, I think for her, it's also like, the fact is that you, rather than talking to me, you found it was so much easier just to steal it from me and not ask or, bring it up to me. So it's like, I can't bring you into the family anymore. I can't threaten my family's safety like that. So, which is so sad, because for someone who, was abandoned by the only family she had, to lose this family, because this meant the world to her. That's why she came here, to be the part of this family. Because, Bess and Diana were having that conversation early in the episode, at the beginning of the episode, about, for Bess, it's not about the money and position. Like, it's about having a family. To her, that was the most important thing. That's what meant the most to her. And to have that stripped away like that, and it's like, she played right into Steven's hand. He planned this all out. He knew, it was like, yeah, he always does research on the mark. So it was never about the jewelry. Like, I think regardless of whether Bess got it early in the episode before he kind of forced her hand, this was always the plan, because he knew how important this was to her. And it's like, oh, by shattering, you put me through hell, I'm gonna put you through hell by basically shattering the thing. He knows that's probably what she wanted more than anything, so to take that away from her, now she's lost. There's no way back into the Marvin family. Even that thing she was supposed to be reading, she just tossed it in the fire, like, just because it doesn't matter. I'm no longer Marvin. But I think she's going to be okay. It's going to take a while, but I think she is going to be okay, because at the end of the day, she still has her friends who are like another family to her. And I think having them around will ease that blow a little bit. It probably won't be the same, because this is your actual family not acknowledging you the second time again. It's like, happened with her mom, and now it's happening again. That's enough. That's definitely going to screw someone up. Yeah, that would definitely screw someone up on many different levels. On the mental, emotional side of it. On another side of this episode is the situation with obviously there's a conversation Ryan and Nick have about, all right, like how he's going to handle the interview, how Ryan is going to try and make it seem like the reason why he's trying to take over his family business, that obviously that he doesn't have ulterior motives, but obviously he's got to make sure to convince everybody why he's doing what he's doing, but also hiding any connection to Nancy or she'll be in trouble, which is also like, oh yeah, Nancy brought me up. It's like, no, just give her time. And I love that whole thing of like, he's kind of peeking out and Nancy's like, Ryan, I see you. Stop being weird. He's like, oh, hey. And she's like, bye. And it's just like, I love that moment. It's like, yeah, and obviously he's hitting it off with Val because there's a little bit of flirtatiousness, but also like, it's like, oh, so you've forgiven your father? He's like, yeah, spend time with me. You get context about, forgiveness isn't so simple. Like he's saying that there's more complexities and context to it, but it was just, he was pivoting that like a boss, like the way he was kind of like, oh, like, let me ask you a question. Do you get along with your parents? And he's like, see, if we all got along with our parents, therapists wouldn't be as good, wouldn't be having the, therapists wouldn't be as much in demand or wouldn't make as much money as they do or something. So they were kind of hitting it off. But showing you how good Val is that obviously she went and visited Lucy's mom, and it's like, oh yeah, like she said you bring her groceries and stuff like that. It's like, yeah, she has some stuff. Yeah, she's also talking about she wants to see Lucy's baby, and it's like, what? It's like, yeah, she wants to see her granddaughter again, which is like, sadly, Nancy did visit her. So I was like, damn it. And it's like, Ryan has to pivot and be like, nah. It's like, could it possibly be that Lucy was pregnant? And it's like, have you ever looked at it? She's like, no, there's nothing to it. She's like, yeah. He's like, yeah, it's nice, but it's kind of a nice, hypothesis or theory, but sadly it's not true. It's like, ugh. But we see at the end, Val, she hasn't given up that angle. Like, obviously that investigative instinct kicks in and she's like, I'm going to need a couple more days to look into this, which is like, she's going to be the undoing because it's like, Ryan's doing everything. And it's like, no, like he's doing all this for the purpose. Cause she even threw out there, it's like, yeah, cause if you had a daughter, they would actually have rightful heir, claim to the family fortune and situation. I'm curious how, once all this news comes out, I wonder how Nancy's going to feel about it. I mean, I don't know if she realizes what's going on. I don't know if like Nick's really explained everything that they're doing. I mean, he explains it to Ace, but maybe Nancy's kind of more in the know and kind of understand. But that's the problem. Like the moment Nancy finds out, she'll all be like, no, like let me do this because I'm going to take this and burn it to the ground. So it's probably a thing of don't let Nancy know because that's the reason why they don't want her involved because she will dismantle that family legacy and Everett will do whatever it takes to protect it. So especially because he already hates her guts, like finding out like, oh, she's potentially going to take his company and everything his family's built and have it, that's definitely going to lead to some issues. So, but obviously Val investigating, that's definitely going to be some messy situation. She's going to end up exposing the truth and it's going to have major ripple effects. Because the sad thing is, I think her and Ryan are hitting it off. So it is going to be a thing of like, he probably is going to end up accidentally letting his guard down around her and she's going to stumble upon the truth. So we'll see how that ends up ultimately playing out. But another angle to this episode is obviously George and Nancy looking into the shroud situation, trying to figure out how it works. Because George is like, yeah, I've kept the shroud just in case anything ever happens to me again. I want to make sure it's nearby so you guys can kind of bring me back if necessary. But they find out, they look into the previous owner of it. It was a dude named Ralph Jenkins. And sadly, they show up at Ralph's place, but he's dead. And so his niece was talking about the fact that he heard voices, and then we also looking into the, George was looking up and it's like, hey, Nancy, look at this. He died when I was being resurrected. And now Nancy's like, holy crap, I killed that dude because only one person could be, like, he was in a 3-car crash and it's like, he was potentially resurrected by his mom. So that shroud can only resurrect one person at a time. And the moment someone else get resurrected, that new life that person was given is taken from them. They die again. So they can't use the shroud again because if they try to use it again, if it gets used on anyone else, George is going to die. But it also ends up, they're kind of figuring out the rules to it because it's like, so obviously his niece said like, oh, he heard voices. So what if the other 2 people involved in the crash, the other 2 drivers, their spirits got sucked into, Ralph's body, so it's like, he had 2 other voices in his head to George's one, and it's like, yeah, things could be worse. But George is kind of like, well, he lived his life, so it's okay. Like she was trying to like have a top positive spin to it, but Nancy's like, what? come, George, that almost like, George, that's so messed up. An innocent dude died. She feels responsible because like, I'm the one that killed the innocent dude. It's almost like, yeah, but yeah, he lived his life. I mean, obviously it wasn't that great because he was apparently crazy, but it turns out the reason why he was crazy because there was two other voices in his head. And Nancy ends up talking about it later on, but it's like he was locked up in an asylum. So it's like, if George doesn't find a way to coexist with Odette, she will literally lose her mind. So that's definitely a complicated development on that front. I even love Nancy being like, well, I guess there's the whole thing of flatlining you and then bring you back with the shroud to kind of do a reset. And it's like, wait, you were going to flatline me? Were you thinking about that seriously? She's like, not seriously. I mean, come on, George. It was just kind of an idea. It's not like I was really, really thinking about it. It's like, wow. I mean, we saw that like Nancy had a little, like, you know, on her paper, she was like writing out just like all the possibilities of just trying to figure out how to, you know, expel Odette from her body. But we did learn other interesting things. Like, for example, Odette can, if she chooses to, she can listen in on some of George's experiences, but sometimes she can't 100% control when the switch happens. Sometimes, like, for example, she can kind of do it a little bit, take control when she wants to, but George, like, her mind resists her already. So there's that, but she also doesn't have full control where she can basically bring George out. She can come to the surface, but she has a hard time intentionally bringing George to the surface. But it's interesting because this whole thing sadly makes Nancy kind of confront a lot of stuff, because it's like, oh yeah, like you're in this predicament kind of because of your own circumstances. It's like, right, I have a hard time, because it was a whole thing about like, oh, because it is kind of messed up that Odette's like talking mad shit about Nancy. It's like, all the stuff that you've done on the people you've killed is like, yeah, but that was because I was brutally murdered and then I became the Aglaika. I was cursed as the Aglaika, and everyone else knew the lowdown on how the Aglaika thing worked. It's not my fault they broke the deals and ended up getting killed. Like, they knew what was what. Even you. And even Nancy was like, yeah, she realizes that's all something she has a hard time listening. Like, doing things without thinking about the consequences. First and foremost, you know, the whole situation with the Aglaika, and now with the shroud, it's like she does it time and time again, things without realizing the consequences. Even wondering on some level, could it be like, oh, maybe it's just in my DNA, you know, maybe I'm destined to just kind of, you know, what kind of person does that? Like, because she also blames herself because it's like, because she did the shroud thing, we don't know for sure, but at least the way things are working out, it can't just be a coincidence, right? Which George was hoping, like, oh, can it just be a coincidence for once? Not everything being connected and there being a cause and effect unto all the actions that we take and stuff. But for her, it's like, I also killed an innocent dude that was just living his life. Yes, it was a bring George back. So yes, it was me being selfish. Granted, I didn't know at the time, but, you know, if she knew it, would she still make the same choice is the big question, because, you know, she does care a lot about George, and she would probably in her mind is like, I bear responsibility because there's a Aglaika's coming after us because of me. My choices have led to this time and time again. And that's something that's really sinking into Nancy and making her think, like, maybe, you know, what kind of person does that make me? It makes me like my family legacy. Like, maybe I am destined to be this person. And Odette finds out, like, wait, you're a Hudson. She didn't know that, because I guess the conversation hasn't subsequently come up since it hasn't outwardly been said since Odette took possession of George. So she only pops in every once in a while to hear things she thought was interesting. Which I'm wondering, like, she doesn't know that Bess is a Marvin, right? Once again, I'm surprised you haven't jumped on that immediately, but maybe she's not really clicking in on those conversations, or maybe she is, and I'm just surprised she hasn't. But to be fair, we haven't, like, the only interaction so far we've seen Odette and Bess have is like, you know, when they were at the restaurant, and it was just that one moment of like, oh, like, if you want to get rid of me, you're going to have to kill your friend. And it's like, will that really even work? And Odette just kind of give her a smile like, I don't know, will it? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe I'm lying to you. We don't know. Because it could just be a thing of, hey, the moment she dies, maybe I can take full possession of the body. And it's like, well, George died. I mean, we don't know about Ralph's situation, whatever happened to those other two spirits. Like, but it seems like, you know, I don't think it would work out for Odette either if George dies. So it is self-preservation. I am curious to know what, like, that's going to look like. Maybe it looked like, a split personality type of situation, kind of similar to, Grandia 2. There's a character like that has two different personalities. I mean, they become literal, not just personality, become two different people. Well, I guess there's also like, Inner and Outer Mocha is a more recent example that's been in my head because it kind of researched in my head because of the Valentine's video I did last month. It's just like if they don't find some balance of like spirits and mind, like it's going to drive them insane. But I'm curious, like what that looks like. Maybe they will work it out. Like, all right, I'm such an idiot. It fits along the example of the others, but a CW example, my idiot self, is Frost and Caitlin. They're literally dealing with the same thing. Like, it's probably going to have to work out a schedule, figuring that whole thing out, maybe. Like, I guess that's kind of where we'll kind of go from there, but I went on a whole tangent. The thing is, Odette, like, snapped the moment she heard that Nancy's a, Hudson, so it's like, okay. Now, what that might necessarily entail going forward is definitely going to be interesting, because Odette, knowing that, she might accidentally blab that to somebody she had no bit. I mean, for all we know, Val might run into George, but George might not be George at the time, might be Odette, and Odette, oh, you mean you're talking to a husband, it must be, like, she's part of that cursed bloodline. It's like, whoa, Nancy Drew, she's a Hudson. That might be how this whole thing gets blown open. Just, throwing it out there. That potentially could be a route, but we do have George at the end explaining to Nick like what's happened, and like obviously if someone uses a shroud again, I'm dead. But it's like other than that, like we're on top of figuring this whole thing out. But then Nancy shows up back at the restaurant, everything's cleared out, and it's like, oh, that bastard Steven. I was hoping like. Because it's like, how dare you like hurt and manipulate Bess like that? Threaten to kill Nancy and George, like willing to kill innocent people. I was like, you're a scumbag. You don't get to just walk away from this, right? Well, it turns out we're not done with Steven, because I would assume that was him robbing them at the very end. And he ended up taking the shroud. So, because we don't know what will happen if the shroud gets destroyed either. Like, that might have the same effect of like, oh, if you try to resurrect someone with it, someone else gets resurrected with it, it might just automatically kill the last person it was used on, that being George. So we don't know. Like, so it's going to have to be a situation that we don't have to be like, hopefully Steven's taking care of it, but he's also probably potentially going to sell it. That's going to be a whole thing. So it feels like it can't be anyone but Steven that stole that stuff. So it's like, once again, we're not done with that bastard. I'm glad, because I want him to kind of get his comeuppance after kind of ruining things for Bess and, stealing from all of them now too. So we'll see if they'll be able to get everything back in the next episode, or just how all that turn of events is going to ultimately end up turning out, like where that all ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. I said it all in a very roundabout way. Sorry. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.